Welcome, today we are looking at the PS5's hardware spec compared to PC. Here we have a basic list of what the PlayStation 5 is made of. The CPU, a 8-core AMD Zen 2. GPU, AMD RDNA 2, 36 compute units, producing 10.3 teraflops. Memory, 512 DDR4, 16GB GDDR6. Storage, 825GB M.2 PCIe 4.0 NVMe SSD. Here we have the closest PS5 PC equivalent we could find. The CPU, a 8-core Ryzen 7 4700S. GPU, AMD Radeon RX 6700M with 36 compute units producing 10.6 teraflops. Memory, 16GB DDR4 3200MHz and a Gen 4 SSD. Here we have a build with the closest available PC parts. The CPU, a Ryzen 7 4750GE. GPU, AMD Radeon RX 5700 XT. Memory, 16GB DDR4 3200MHz. Motherboard B550M and the M.2 SSD 4th generation. Knowing that these parts will be difficult to find, I made a list with easily available parts. CPU, Ryzen 5 5500, GPU, Radeon RX 6600, memory is your normal DDR4 16GB 3200MHz, and last we have our Gen 4 SSD. Here we have some benchmarks where you can compare your own PC parts. Just go download Signbench or Passmark and run the benchmark tests. Now that we have that out of the way, let's look at the PS5 CPU graphics cards compatibility list. For AMD we have the RX 550, the RX 560, the RX 570, the RX 580 and the RX 590. For GeForce we have the GT 1030, the GTX 1050, the GTX 1050 Ti and the GTX 1060. Okay, so next we will look at the AMD Ryzen 4800H, which is a laptop processor but basically the same processor that the Xbox Series X uses. Here we can see all the graphics cards that's being used with this processor, with the most powerful being the RTX 3060. The next question we will cover is graphics memory. How much graphics memory does the PS5 use? People online talk about the PS5 using 10GB graphics memory and 6GB RAM. With the amount of memory that PC games use, I would say a minimum of 8GB, an average of 12GB, a maximum of 16GB, with your SSD taking care of the rest. There's one last thing I would like to highlight, and that is PlayStation 5 laptops. You can basically get a PlayStation 5 laptop equivalent by just going to Google and typing in AMD Radeon RX 6700M gaming laptop. If you enjoyed the video up until now, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for any future content.